welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast. As usual, I'm joined with Nathan and we have plenty to get our teeth into. After what's been, a bit of an up and down week for Middlesbrough, 2 games to talk about, plenty of games to preview, and of course some listener questions to dissect as well. But firstly, Nathan, given that we were beaten at the weekend, how are you coping?
Yeah, mixed emotions with this one. Obviously 2 games to get into, 1 win and 1 very disappointing defeat. I think it probably echoes the reaction that this podcast is going to get. Really, we'll be happy with the initial result, but the ending of this podcast will be a bit iffy. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, we should just quickly say, and of course it's got to receive a little bit of credit from me, and I'm sure those watching on YouTube will appreciate it as well. But today it is 18 years to the day that we won the Carling Cup. So Nathan, please do us all a favour and show us what Borough top you're wearing.
Carling Cup winners one.
Perfect. What a shirt. I just thought I had, let you show that off a little bit because it's a beautiful piece of kit. But moving on to 18 years ahead now from that day, we are at the stage of the season where, every game is crucial, and especially after the Bristol City result we spoke about in the last podcast, the West Brom game was probably, built up to be as big as what it was because, for me, it felt like Bristol City was the first real sort of disappointment under Chris Wilder. Now, I know we'd been beaten prior to that off Preston, which everyone kind of seems to forget about, but rightly so, because it was only, the second game of Chris Wilder's tenure. And then Blackburn, which was a bit of a sort of slap back down to reality after such a good run. But Bristol was the first real disappointment. So it was, crucial that we bounced back and got ourselves a positive result. Going into the game, I think we probably expected more changes, but there was one change. But, that was sort of enforced, wasn't it? Riley McGree in for Matt Crooks, given that he was suspended for the West Brom game, going back to Tuesday now, of course. Did you sort of expect changes up front? Because, Connolly and Balogun kept their place, but I think a lot of people were quite eager to see some changes in the front too.
Yeah, I did expect some changes up front, really. As we've said in previous podcasts, we kind of both expect that the forward line will be interchanged quite regularly from now until the end of the season. And I think going on after that Bristol City game, with Connolly and Balogun not really having too much of an impact in that game, changes were expected in the front too, but that wasn't to be. Chris Wilder stuck with the 2 lone players, and yeah, it was a strange team sheet, I think, with many expecting changes. But yeah, good to see McGree in there, finally getting a first start for Middlesbrough in the side after impressing at Bristol City on that Saturday. So yeah, a decent enough team that could do a job against a West Brom side that hadn't been on the best run of form at all, hadn't scored a goal yet under Steve Bruce.
Yeah, of course. Just a bit of a theme there, really, from Chris Wilder, in the fact that, it is apparent now that even sort of, as sometimes reactionary as what fans are, he is, I think he's probably a bit of a player's dream to play for, because if, say you have a bad game, and, I think it was quite apparent, I think probably Balogun and Connolly would admit that neither of them really pulled up any trees against Bristol. They still are rewarded with, the faith that Chris Wilder does have in them, because, plenty of us, I'm sure, would have changed that front too. But then, as I say, they were rewarded with a bit of faith and given another start. So I know it didn't quite work out for the sort of some of the forward line as we progress through the game. But just something to pick up on there, because Chris Wilder certainly trusts these players, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, and it is important not to sort of batter the confidence either. We need everyone in this running now. The league is so tight, and it's even tighter now after this weekend's set of results. So, yeah, everyone needs to be bang at it and hopefully fit and firing in this running.
Yeah, so moving into the game now, of course, and like many times this season, and like many, EFL sort of fan club podcasts throughout the leagues, we'll start our discussion with a hideous decision from an EFL referee. Isaiah Jones down the right, as he usually does, manages to get in behind a defence. Of course, he gets in behind the West Brom defence, going straight into the action. And to be honest, with his pace, I know, referees aren't really taught to sort of look at it from individual perspectives because, if it had have been Sol Bamba breaking in behind the West Brom defence, I'm sure, a lot of people would have thought, well, there's no chance that he goes all the way and sort of scores after getting in behind. But Isaiah Jones has got the pace once he gets behind that back line to go all the way. He's essentially through on goal given his pace. He's brought down, almost rugby tackled, I think you could call it. And yet nothing's given, Nathan. So, I mean, that decision, I think I already know what your opinion's going to be on it because it was a dreadful decision. But were you not just as shocked as what I was? Because I actually couldn't believe my eyes when this decision was given.
Yeah, it was, nothing short of disgraceful that you can miss that, and the linesman on the side as well. Connor Townsend wrapped both his arms around Jones's waist after Jones has took the ball down and is pretty much going through on goal, and the referee decides to play on. No foul, no yellow cards, no possible red card even. An awful decision by a referee and a linesman on that side as well that were abysmal all day, really, even with just little decisions. We'll get into the second half and things like that, and I'll speak then on moments in the game that didn't really matter, but were still incidents that they missed that could have proved very important in the game. But yeah, the standard of refereeing pretty much in this country, never mind just at this level, is shambolic, really.
Yeah, it certainly isn't great, and it's probably a good job that, unlike Chris Wilder, we can say these types of things without being fined from the FA because, had you have been the manager, I think you may have just received a hefty check.
Massive one.
Hefty fine through the post, actually. So it's a good job you're not sitting in the hot seat, Nathan. From that decision, I think Chris Wilder actually spoke about it after the game and said, it sort of got our backs up a little bit and it kind of showed in the performance. There was a few sort of niggly little fouls and just decisions, as you said, that went on throughout that first half and throughout the game, really, but mainly in the first half where, the crowd were getting the backs up a little bit, and rightfully so, because the referee just kept on getting small decisions wrong and wrong and wrong. And like Chris Wilder said, I think it affected our performance because I can't really remember after that, small burst of pace from Isaiah Jones that we created all that much in the first half, to be honest. And because of the fact we didn't create a lot, it meant that West Brom probably, you could argue had the better of the first half. And during that time where they did have the better of the first half, they did obviously take the lead. It all starts from, quite unlikely source, really, because Dale Fry goes up to win the header, and actually I think he heads it backwards, if I remember correctly. I think it's McNair or Fry. I'm sure it's one of the two.
Fry, yeah.
Under pressure from Andy Carroll, who, I mean, we all know what threat he possesses. But he sort of bundles his way through, gets to the byline, and, a real nail-biting moment. I was expecting sort of Carroll to turn into prime sort of Messi and just dink it over Lumley's head into the back, as he usually does when he turns up at the other side. But he didn't quite reach Messi levels. I think he tries to cut it back and it's deflected out to Jason Malumbi. Malumbi then strikes it, and I think it actually takes a little nick off Tav's foot, which then beats Lumley and gives West Brom the lead. But quite a poor goal to concede from our perspective. Given that really apart from that chance, West Brom didn't create all that much throughout the full game, really, not just the first half.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's becoming a bit a bit too regular, the goals that we concede being of a poor standard, really, and not necessarily because of the opposition's exceptional play, but rather Boro's own mistakes. Fry gets caught under the ball and flicks it backwards. Carroll gets the byline, crosses that ball, and McNair, slightly off balance, tries to clear it, but doesn't do it justice, and passes it pretty much to Malumbi on a plate. And yeah, I think we're quite unlucky that Tavernier is diving in, trying to get there and make a block, because it's took a slight nick off him, and it's wrong-footed Joe Lumley and ended up in the corner. And Borough found themselves 1-0 down at home against West Brom side that hadn't scored yet under Steve Bruce in like 3 games. But yeah, from then on, in that second half of the first half, really, since conceding the goal, I didn't think Borough offered anything. I thought that the reaction to the goal was just Borough being flat and lethargic towards the end of that first half. And I felt if West Brom had recognised that we were there for the taking, they probably could have got a second and extended that lead. But yeah, in at the break at 1-0, and we had chances to change the way we were set up and hopefully come out in the second half with a bit more bite about us.
Yeah, as you say, a chance at halftime to change things around. I mean, just going into halftime, sort of, as you say, the second sort of half of the first half, it was becoming apparent that the front two were just not working. They were getting no change out of West Brom's backline. Kyle Bartley, of course, the physical presence that he is, seemed to be enjoying sort of just taking the ball off Aaron Connolly at every chance he really could have at taking the ball, I guess. And Chris Wilder, again, going sort of back to post-match after the West Brom game, spoke about Balogun dropping in and trying to receive the ball on the turn, almost like sort of playing in a 10 role. And, you know, I'm not saying that the service into Balogun was particularly good, because it wasn't. You know, the ball was sort of pumped into him at some pace a number of times, and just left Balogun with really either, you know, having to pluck out some unbelievable touch with a West Brom defender on him at all times, you know, at his backside, trying to nip the ball. And it was just quite clear to see that front two wasn't working at all, because we weren't managing to get in behind the West Brom defence. And every time we come short, Balogun would just have the ball nicked off him. So for me, I was expecting changes at halftime. You know, we got changes very quickly after halftime, but I was quite amazed that, you know, Balogun and Connolly both were back on the pitch as the second half started. Going into the second half, of course, you know, the changes were made, 5 minutes in, I think it was. Taylor and Balogun coming off for Watmore and Sparrow, and a bit of a positional change at that point as well. Of course, Marcus Tavernier drifted out wide to take up the left wing-back role, which we spoke about a little bit because he occupied that in the final sort of half an hour at Bristol City as well. And that's something that, you know, we both said we'd like to see a little bit more of. And you know, maybe he's lucky, maybe he's our football knowledge kicking in, Nathan, who knows. I'm sure other people can sort of judge that one for us, but it sort of turned out to be a little bit of a master stroke, Marcus Tavernier at left wing back, didn't it?
Completely changed the game, didn't it? Jones struggled to get all too much joy in that first half, and in the second half as well. It again wasn't his best game, although we did get a goal down that right-hand side. But yeah, Tavernier as an option down that left sort of gave us that balance to go down either side, have pace, a bit of trickery and ability to beat a man down both sides at that point. And it certainly changed the game in Borough's favour. Chance creation was much greater in that second half when the switch was made. And I think with Sparrow and Watmore on the pitch as well at the time, I think the movement of those two helped create the chances as well. I think just in that first half, when you play a side like West Brom that are defensively resolute, experienced centre halves, you're not going to get much change out of them at all, especially two young, sort of inexperienced centre forwards in Connolly and Balogun. They're not going to pin players like Kyle Bartley and Semi Ajayi and turn them and beat them. We need more experience there from the off, really, to tussle with those players. And I think Sperard and Watmore gave us that in the second half, really, and gave them a bit of a tougher time than they had in that first half.
Yeah, as you say, I think the subs were needed at that point. And, as I previously mentioned, I was almost surprised that they weren't made sooner. But when they did come on, they sort of made an immediate impact. And, although a lot of credit, and rightfully so, goes to Tav, because, he managed to stretch West Brom's team out on the left, as opposed to sort of being a little bit sort of reliant on the right-hand side with Jones, as we also spoke about against Bristol. But I think a lot of credit's got to go to Sperard and Watmore, because although, they were being sort of pushed wide, the West Brom back line, it also meant that the centre-halves were not sort of just occupied by, people trying to go short. Watmore and Sperard exchange positions, numerous times when they play as a pair. Watmore, we all know by now, that man could run for England. Never stops, seems to sprint everywhere. I can imagine him going for a pint of milk and just nipping out and sprinting to the local corner shop, to be honest. He just seems to love sprinting more than your average sort of person. And his movement and Sperard's combined with, as we say, Jones, and also having the threat from the left, with Tavernier, sort of won us the game in the end. Just in terms of moving on to the equaliser, before we talk about Tav, making that immediate impact as the wing back, absolutely superb threaded pass in behind the back line from Riley McGree. So delicate, perfectly weighted with that left foot, of course. I thought he was excellent throughout the game. And it's easy to sort of forget because, Tav puts the ball in for McNair, but just to set Tav away down the left, a really just pass full of quality, to be honest, from Riley McGree.
Yeah, it was. And to be fair, it was a good move as well. Again, we've seen Borough under Chris Wilder being patient in attacking positions, and it actually comes from us trying to work space down that right-hand side. Dijksteel driving inside, but nothing opens up for him, so he knocks it back into House and on the edge of the box. They switch it out to McNair to McGree. McNair moves forward into an attacking position. McGree threads that ball through, which is fantastic. Takes the two West Brom players out the game with the pass. Tavernier again, just getting his head up, composed, ball across, and it was a pretty simple goal for McNair, just a tap in, but it got us back into the game. Really well worked goal, and moments of quality again get us back into the game there.
Yeah, and at that point, it really felt to me, I know, given your university circumstances, it's difficult for you to get back down during the week. But in the stadium, it felt like as soon as we equalised, there was that change in atmosphere almost. And I thought, yeah, we're going to, despite in the first half, I must say, I thought I can't see us scoring because, if that emphasises how sort of poor we were by our standards in the first half, I've genuinely thought, I just, unless something drastic changes, which of course it did, I can't see us scoring. It just didn't have that feeling at all. Whereas when we got the equaliser, I thought, yeah, we're going to go on and nick this because, the momentum of the game changed. And, I tweeted out after the game just saying how grateful that we should be for Chris Wilder because, he was proactive. He made the subs early on. And that's what won us the game in the end, of course, with some, brilliant individual pieces of skill and ability. But the changes and the change of shape, Connolly sort of dropping into that 10 and Sperard and Watmore really just changed the complete face of the game, as I say. Moving on to what turned out to be the winner. Anthony Dijksteel sort of turned into sort of 2009-10 Cristiano Ronaldo, didn't he, on that right-hand side? Stepped in, Megs, I can't remember who it is now. I think it might be Townsend on the left.
Yeah, flicked it through his legs, yeah.
Comes inside, it's sort of, I don't know where he's been hiding them sorts of skills the last few weeks. Manages to get inside, nudges it into the path of Jones, and sort of that same scenario that we've seen so often this season, Jones breaking down the right and ready to square the ball back to whoever's arriving in the box to get another assist. It sort of trickles past Watmore. I think he actually gets a touch on it, and it's just slightly behind him. It flicks into the way of Tav, and he fires in back across the keeper and runs off and celebrates, of course, giving us the lead. But one thing, we've got to give credit to Dijksteel and Jones, and I don't think Watmore, although he might claim the assist, I think that's certainly a technicality rather than something that he's tried to do. But one thing I noticed, especially actually with Tavernier moving to wing back, and the cross, the assist for McNair's goal, and the goal that he scored that won us the game. We have spoken, and so has everyone else really, an awful lot about Tav, going through sometimes one-on-one or getting the ball on the edge of the box and firing shots and just getting his end product wrong. But something which stood out to me is both times and both goal contributions on Tuesday night against West Brom come through just doing things as they come to him, rather than, sometimes I do feel that Tav, sometimes when he has a little bit too long to think about, that's where he sort of lets himself down. Whereas in the left wing back position, it sort of allows him to do things sort of as in a second nature almost, doing things off the cuff as opposed to overthinking it. And, he's managed to get himself a goal and assist. And perhaps, moving forward, I'm sure we'll speak to greater lengths about having that left wing back position. But do you think that helps him, the fact that he just got to make that quick decision rather than, when he's in midfield, maybe he's taking that extra touch or sort of thinking, should I shoot, should I pass? Do you think that left wing back position almost helps him make those decisions in, quicker and more effectively?
I think certainly in the moments that were given to us with that McGree pass and then the ball across, I think Tavernier's done well in those moments there because he doesn't have too much time to think about what he can possibly do apart from either shoot or get a ball across. I think he does particularly well there. But on the whole, I think sometimes he just tries to do a bit too much, which is fine, I suppose. He's just trying to do his best for the team, try to drag the team on his back, but he doesn't necessarily need to do that. I think we don't really need to have star men in this side. I think everyone is pretty much equal in this side. And yeah, I don't necessarily think that he needs to sort of force things as much as he has in past times, because in the last month or so, I think he's probably been one of our standout players, really. I think he's really come into his own. His decision making's been pretty much spot on in every case, really. And yeah, he was rewarded with a goal and an assist, and I'm sure that won't harm his confidence at all.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, sort of from that point, we had not really, huge clear-cut chances, but had, the occasional half chance. And to be honest, I expected West Brom, given, Carroll and some of the physical threats that they have, a lot more of a sort of physical task to, keep the ball out of the goal for the last part of the game. But there wasn't really that onslaught that you'd sort of expect. And I don't know if that's down to sort of West Brom and Steve Bruce's lack of sort of idea of a pattern of play, but certainly, there was the occasional long throw, but nothing really that sort of troubled us all too much. And of course, we grind out that result, and it's a massive result. As I say, it felt almost bigger because of the previous result. But we've just spoken about him, but without advancing through to the Barnsley game yet, that change of system Tav at left wing back. Let's just talk about that because, as we say, we've praised him to the hilt there, and he got his rewards whilst he was in that position. Do you think once we have Riley McGree back and Crooks that could become a permanent fixture?
I think it's certainly an interesting question. I think that given his performances there, his cameos really at Bristol City and against West Brom, I think that he certainly made a case for himself in that position. But we can't forget about his performances in midfield either. His energy in there and his decision making of late's been fantastic. So I think he's really proven himself as a mainstay in that midfield as well. I think coming into this weekend now against Luton in the league, Bowler is back as well in training this week. So now there's Bowler as an option, Taylor, and of course Tavernier to play in that position. So we have 3 options there that can all be weighed up in terms of their end product, their energy, their defensive attributes as well. And yeah, I think Chris Wilder's certainly got options in that position. He's got options, Dawn, as Woodgate would say. But yeah,
Woody.
Yeah, I think with the midfield 3, we're coming back now to a pretty much fully fit squad. Crooks, of course, back from suspension now as well, so he fills in that right side of the midfield role. Howson will probably drop deeper again, and then of course you have Tavernier. McGree could fill in that position as well that Tavernier usually plays if Tavernier was to move to left wing back. So we certainly have options, and I'm certainly not opposed to seeing Tavernier at left wing back again because he put in a fantastic performance in that second half against West Brom.
Yeah, certainly, and I think moving on from a real high point of the week to, unfortunately for us, a real low point at Barnsley, and we'll go through the game and discuss the goals. But going into the game, it felt all too perfect. We'd managed to grind out that result on Tuesday night. Barnsley, bottom of the league. Although they had slightly picked up form going into the game, you still look at that team that's had, I think before the weekend, only 2 home wins, I want to say. I think they've only scored, a handful of goals this season. And by handful, that's no over-exaggeration. They really have been that poor. Of course, going in to Saturday's game, there was changes, of course, given that sort of the changes in the West Brom game, won us the game, as I said. Sparrow, Watmore come in, as you sort of expect. And then when that team lineup comes out on a Saturday at 2:00, you look through the names, and as always, you sort of see the back line, you see the goalkeeper. It's just your usual team. You see Sparrow and Watmore, you think, yeah, I'm happy with those. They made the impact. They deserve their place in the team on Saturday. And then almost a foreign object sort of appears from nowhere where you think, is that a typo? Or James Lear-Saliki in the starting 11. A real shock to, I think, everyone, to be honest. Riley McGree out with a slight muscle strain or something like that. Nothing, that's going to keep him out for the long haul. But certainly when you saw that team, and I know as soon as I seen the team, I sent you a message saying, where's that come from? A real shock to see the almost forgotten man. He'd been nearly shipped out. I think we failed to sort of manage to terminate his loan or get another club to take him on loan, James Lear-Saliki. And then he finds himself in the starting 11 on Saturday. A real shock, Nathan.
Yeah, it was a real spanner in the works, really. Looking at the lineup, as you say, on my phone in the concourse at Barnsley, and I'm thinking, where's McGree? Not on the bench either. Not sure. And it comes out that he's got that muscle strain. Saliki in midfield. I really just thought that he'd be picking up Crooks' usual position. a bit further forward in front of Johnny Howson, who would sit a little bit deeper. But when we get into the game, that just wasn't the case at all. He was playing in that Howson role, which was strange, with Howson playing further forward in that right-sided midfield position that Crooks would usually slot into. And yeah, it was a real shock to see him in there, just thrown in to a big game at a ground where Borough's record's absolutely diabolical. And yeah, it just felt like it could either go really, really well or really, really badly. And within 20 minutes, it was apparent which one that was going to be.
Yeah, it almost had a little bit of a feel, JLS, because I don't really want to sort of keep on saying his full name. Coming into the team, had a little bit of a Adlen Guardiola at Preston away a few years back. Sort of just the forgotten man, just appearing in the starting 11. And I mean that I can't really remember that going too well actually looking back. Although, did we win that day, Preston away, when Guardiola started?
We did, but he got hooked at half-time because we were 2-1 down.
Yeah, well, I mean, very similar when you look at it that way, I suppose. Unfortunately for us, we didn't have the same second half performance as we did that day. But, going into the game now, quite a startlingly bad start to the game, really. Often this season we've started quite brightly. And if we haven't started brightly, it's never been, a real bad start. Whereas, I felt at Oakwell, it was a real bad start. I think it's best to just go to Barnsley's opener, to be honest. They whip a corner and it's defended well. It then goes out back to Barnsley and the ball gets switched. And then, Isaiah Jones gets out, I don't want to say half-heartedly, but, sort of jogs out to try and close the cross down. The cross then comes in, reaches the back post, and it appears that the whole of Borough's backline are playing stuck in the mud, and Mads Andersen just heads in completely unmarked. And at that point, the Oakwell curse just felt all too real, didn't it?
It did. Stood there as it happened, watching the ball sail over the green wall that decided it wasn't going to move. And yeah, Anderson has a simple task just to nod that one in. Nods it in the far corner, 1-0 Barnsley, 6 minutes on the clock. And it was the start of a very bad day for Borough. Yeah, just really a case of if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah, and I think, once they had got their opener, you expected sort of Borough to wake up and really think, we've had bad starts. And as I say, this was, really bad by sort of Chris Wilder's Middlesbrough standards. But they sort of didn't really wake up. And, I remember earlier on this season, Neil Warnock actually talking about some of the players' habits prior to the games and talking about something when they were, missing breakfast. And I think it was apparent that none of them must have had the breakfast on Saturday morning, and just, forgotten to sort of do the basics of what we have done for so long under Chris Wilder and got, massive success from it. Carlton Morris up top for Barnsley, a big, strong unit. Everyone in the Championship knows what ability he has. And he was, it almost felt, to be honest, like he was bullying our full back line. And he was causing us problems. Every time the ball went forward, he seemed to, win the flick or bring it down on his chest and bring others into play. And he continued doing that all up until Bassey doubles the lead for Barnsley. I think it is a punt forward, and you might correct me on this, and Morris is involved. It comes to Bassey. And then, very unlike Dale Fry, I must say, I'm a huge fan of Dale Fry, but, makes some sort of attempt to try and stop Bassey. He sort of skips past him onto the edge of the box and cuts across it into the far corner. It sort of p-rolls into Joe Lumley's goal. And we're 2-0 down after, probably the worst first half of Chris Wilder's tenure. In fact, I'm saying probably, definitely the worst first half of Chris Wilder's tenure. And at 2-0 down, you think, now, as much as this team can sometimes, create chances and score at will, it's always, always difficult once you go 2 behind. And, there was, rightly so, a lot of criticism as soon as that second one hit the back of the net. I mean, what was your reaction stood in that away end at Oakwell? Because it as much as JLS come as a shock, that first half performance come as an even bigger shock to me.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It made me want to go home, if I'm honest. I'd just lost for words watching as it happened, really. Chris Wilder said in that pre-match press conference on Friday that this game would be won and lost in the dressing room. If the players weren't up for it, Barnsley would dominate us physically, and they'd be up for it. They'd be up for a fight. And in that first half, it looked like none of our players wanted it. None of our players wanted to be first into the tackle and have physical battles with their men. They didn't look like they wanted it at all. Saliki, playing in that position where Howson usually plays, was hiding. He didn't want the ball off the centre halves when they had possession of the ball. In fact, he was coming into positions where there was already a player in green. He was stood next to Howson or stood next to Tavernier as they were making options, trying to pick the ball up. I felt like Jones struggled in that first half. I felt like the fullback really, apart from that second half where he's dragged Jones down, probably had Jones's number on the day, really. I thought he did quite well to cope with his pace. And down the other side, really, we lacked threat. Taylor's not going to beat a fullback for pace, really. I felt like really the only player that wanted to get on the ball and look to try and create was Tavernier. Spurra, pretty much anonymous in that first half, really. Everything that went up to him got headed away by Hellick and Anderson. I felt just really, to a man, Barnsley were winning their individual battles and our players didn't want it at all. And at 2-0 down, I felt that we were lucky to go in at half-time 2-0 down and still have a slight possibility of getting something out of the game at that time. After seeing changes made at half-time on Tuesday night, I felt like Wilder would make changes at half-time, which he did, and I felt like they could change the game. But, yeah, it certainly wasn't our day. And Oakwell stays as that horrible, horrible bogey ground for Borough.
Yeah, I think you put it nicely there when you said, Barnsley's players were simply just more up for the fight than what Middlesbrough were on Saturday. And, we speak about Saliki just quickly because, of course, he come off at half-time and, from now on, I think it'd be very surprising to ever see him probably put a Middlesbrough shirt on again, to be honest. I think it sort of, signals the end, certainly after, probably we all thought his time was already up at Middlesbrough. I really can't see him ever pulling on a Middlesbrough shirt again. But for me, the most confusing part of it was, Howson was in the team. It wasn't as though Howson was missing from that midfield three that we've seen, of Howson as the sitter in that three, Tavernier on either side, and, either whether it be McGree or Crooks. And we've seen success in a lot of the games. And one thing I will say is, I thought even against West Brom, we did come out on top. I thought we massively missed the physicality of Crooks in midfield. And again, I felt we missed it against Barnsley because they won that midfield battle on Saturday. But the confusion point really was that, as you said, Saliki, for me, and from what I've seen of him, and to be fair, none of us really have seen all too much of him because it hasn't quite worked out, the loan move. But I always felt that he would be more suited to playing in one of those, more advanced or certainly less deeper than what he was positions. And it just confused me, to be honest, because his skill set, I guess you could call it, does not suit, getting round the pitch as much as what Johnny Howson does, breaking up play, just being that sort of, annoying player that no other midfielder wants to play against, just putting out fires around the pitch. It is more suited to, and from what we've heard as well, even prior to him joining Middlesbrough, was, someone that links the play from midfield to attack and, has a range of passing, but him playing in that deep lying midfield role just did not work at all, did it? And, I think in the end, to be honest, I say we miss Crooks as physical presence. I think Saliki, as much as, it was partly him as well, it almost felt like he was sort of bullied out of the midfield. And of course, he paid the price for that and was substituted at half-time, which, I think everyone was expecting, to be honest.
Yeah, they were. I think really the standout moment for me in the first half that summed up pretty much the performance. Saliki gets the ball played into him in our half with himself facing our own goal. He takes one touch that doesn't come out of his feet. He takes another touch that gets the ball out of his feet but doesn't send him in a direction apart from getting out of his feet. And by the time he's ready to take that third touch to eventually get it out of his feet in a direction, two Barnsley players were stood on him, ready to nick the ball off him in an attacking position and get straight at our back line. And they did so and nearly scored, actually. And from what I've seen of Saliki, I don't want to batter him too much, but at Coventry, when he first made his debut, I thought that he has ability to pass the ball well, but it felt like that day at Coventry, he needed to get up to sort of the tempo of the Championship and realise that you're not going to have all the time in the world to dilly-dally on the ball. And he still hasn't learnt that, I don't think. And yeah, as you say, I don't think that he'll probably feature for Chris Wilder ever again, really. I thought that probably if McGree was fit, he would have been the man to play instead of Saliki, and Howson would have, of course, played in his usual position. But injury and suspension sort of disrupted the full system on Saturday. And yeah, the first half was absolutely dreadful and the worst first half performance certainly that I've seen under Chris Wilder so far, which was very, very disappointing.
Yeah, and obviously, as we say, I think Saliki, I don't think we ever want to, really go overboard and batter a player because, Saliki, I guess you could, in his side of things, he'll probably be thinking he had limited minutes at the Africa Cup of Nations. He hasn't really been given a chance at all to get up to speed whilst he's been at the club. So, perhaps you could look at it that way, but I think it's just evident, as we say, that he's probably not going to get up to the pace, and that probably will be the last that we see of him in a Borough shirt, probably forever now. But he was substituted at half-time, as was Duncan Watmore, which out of the two up top, I felt either could have really gone off. I don't think either particularly really done themselves any favours. But it was Watmore that was sacrificed. Balogun and Connolly come on the pitch. And in fairness to Balogun, after, quite a poor first half and performance against West Brom, I thought he'd come on and looked lively early on in the second half. He hits the post, gets through, and to be fair, on his left foot. And, he seems to always have chances that fall onto his left foot, despite him being a right-footed player, which, is slightly frustrating, but I guess it's just the sort of positions that he takes up. He hits the post, quite unlucky to be fair, because I think he's beaten the Barnsley goalkeeper and it comes back off the woodwork. And then after that, you kind of, for that split second, you think, well, we've managed to create one chance. Obviously, I'm sure Chris Wilder would have given every single player a bit of a rocket up, where at half time. And you expect Borough to then go on and get that goal and get themselves back in the game. But actually it was quite the opposite. And, a comedy of errors later, and you 3-0 down at Oakwell to bottom of the league, Nathan.
Yeah, I think that moments before that, I can't remember if it was moments before that or whether it was after Barnsley's third, but Spurs getting played through with half of the pitch to run pretty much, and it just takes too long, plain and simply. It's poor play from Andras, if I'm honest. He needs to get that shot off sooner. I think it was Britain that got back and tackled him, but yeah, it was certainly another missed opportunity at 2 down to get us back into the game, and yeah, as you say, a comedy of errors really lead to that third. Borough on the attack, of course, at the start of that second half, looking to create a way back into the game, and the ball gets cleared to halfway. Borough have committed a lot of men forward, obviously trying to get one back, and the ball is not really travelling at a difficult sort of pace or trajectory towards Anthony Dijksteel on halfway, and he gets it all wrong, which is very, very poor, really. He needs to get that under control, and then the comedy of errors that precede that don't actually happen. But yeah, Bassey, who was a threat all day, really chases after the loose ball into Borough's half. Dijksteel, to be fair to him, does well to get back, and I thought he was probably going to drag Bassey to the floor, if I'm honest. But he does well to get back, get goal side, but doesn't deal with Bassey, and he sort of strikes a shot that he's off balance when he hits the shot. He's just trying to hit something towards goal. Lumley's sort of come out and tried to sort of make himself big, I suppose, and he's kept his legs wide open, and it's just slotted through his legs and p-rolled into that end opposite the away end at Oakwell, and from then on it was just sort of game done. Borough weren't going to find themselves a way back into this game at all. I think that at 3, it's game done. 2, it would have been difficult. 3, finished. And yeah, the away end sort of just had any little bit of hope that was left after Balogun striking the post and Spurs going through on goal. It had that hope completely sucked out of it, and yeah, the away end certainly fell silent.
Yeah, no, I guess we could talk about the goal for an age really, and pick out small moments that resulted in, as you say, I think the football in turn really would be a pea roller, to be honest, to go through Joe Lumley's legs. And as you say, it's disappointing from Dijksteel. I think we've got to, as we've spoken about last podcast, again, Lumley's under a lot of criticism at the moment, once again. But that chance doesn't happen if Dijksteel just simply controls the ball on halfway, which you would expect him to do. Of course, he doesn't do that. And, although he gets back in, as you say, and sort of holds Bassey back a little bit and prolongs him getting that shot, I don't think Lumley really particularly does himself any favours. He sort of, if anything, when he should be limiting the chances of him scoring, actually increases the chances of him scoring the position that he takes up and the stance that he goes for, which is, certainly a confusing one when you watch it back. But, of course, it's easy for us to say that. As you say, from that point onwards, it never really truly felt like we could get anything out of the game. We do get back into the game, however, with a consolation, it looked like, really, for me. Jones, as you say, beats his fullback and brought to the ground. Spurs then steps up, sticks a penalty away, quite calmly dispatched, in fairness, a decent penalty. And then really the moment where I felt, if we are in the second half, to be honest, as soon as the third went in, classic pessimistic Middlesbrough fan that I am, thought, well, that's that done, to be honest. But when Connolly hits the back of the net, before obviously the flag goes up for offside, there was a slight sort of twinkle inside of me that thought, we couldn't, could we? But, once that gets given offside, you do think, yeah, just settle yourself back down and relax, because we are not clawing back 3 goals, never mind 4 goals and going on and producing something like magical, as though, I hoped in my head at the time. But actually probably poor on Connolly's side, because, Ness strides through sort of the Barnsley half, and Connolly just needs to keep his line, because there's no one marking him to his left, and that's where the space is created. If he manages to just hold on, and I'm sure he's eager to impress and put that chance away. And it's actually not a bad finish. He goes back across the Barnsley goalkeeper, and it goes in. But a little bit naive there, perhaps, just to go too early. Do you think?
Possibly, yeah. I felt that twinkle that you're talking about. I did have a moment where I thought that we could have been back into it when the ball did hit the net. I made the stupid decision to jump up and celebrate before looking at the linesman. I did jump up and sort of give it a come on, Borough sort of thing, but yeah, looked at the linesman and just sort of shook my head and just sort of laughed to myself and thought, what a doyle you look like now. But yeah, we certainly did have chances. Connolly had another one as well, that really should have struck first time down the right hand side. Dijksteel and Jones creating chances. Ball comes across. Connolly should just hit it first time on his right foot. Decides to take a touch. With his back to turn himself back to goal, with his back towards goal, and then tries to fire a left-footed shot, and he sails it right into the away end. Just for me, just hit it first time into that near post with a bit of whip and bend on it. But yeah, I think really after that offside goal, we knew it wasn't going to be our day. And I actually, to be fair, did say to my brother that was with me, I said, this game will be 3-2 and we'll score with 10 seconds left on the clock.
So, yeah, and you were correct. It's a shame you didn't sort of put that on as a bet to claw back any sort of good feeling and sort of any mood, because I can imagine that trip back from Barnsley was, it's not a huge journey by any stretch of the imagination, but it probably felt double the time that it actually took because of that result, I can imagine.
Well, yeah, just a quick sort of diversion. I thought, right, I'll check my train back, see which platform I'm on Saturday. I checked it at halftime. Comes up, train cancelled. Thought this day is just brilliant. Like, it is absolutely brilliant. Uh, anyway, literally, for anyone that knows Orkwell and that away end, that hill where all the coaches park and the train stations on the other side of that hill, I had a horrible jog up that hill as the full-time whistle blew and made my earlier train with literally a minute to spare. So sort of made me feel a bit better about myself, that. But yeah, we'll get back into the footy now anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a lot worse, I suppose. I didn't actually know anything, but had you have missed your train, that really could have been, a day from hell, to be honest. As you say, you expected us to get that second goal and make it 3-2 with little time remaining. Of course, we did do that. That was after Balogun had time to hit the post again. Another left-footed strike that Cannon's back off, and the Barnsley keeper's beaten, but as sort of expected on a day like Saturday, though, well, it just wasn't to be. Cannon's back off the post. And then later on, Dijksteel flashes one across the box, and under pressure from Dale Fry, the Barnsley player turns it into his own goal. And that really 3-2. A disappointing defeat. I guess the only positive you can take is that we've scored 2 again, but to counter that, we've conceded 3 at bottom of the league. So that's the major concern. At this point of, Chris Wilder's tenure, it's been overwhelmingly, positive. There's a few sort of, the Bristol game and Saturday's game that have crept in, and, even the West Brom goal that we conceded. It's become a little bit of late that perhaps, and Chris Wilder said it himself in the post-match press conference, that actually, we're all sort of very good and nice when we have the ball at our feet. We can, once upon a time, it would have actually been us being able to create chances, which would have been the problem. That's no longer the problem. And actually, as of late, I think we've probably become a little bit too easy to attack against, actually. And the manner of goals that we've conceded of late have been, really sloppy, and goals that, us watching back at fans, it's horrible to see, but as a manager, I'm sure Chris Wilder looks back at the 3 goals against Barnsley and the goals against Bristol, I should say, and the goal against West Brom, and just think something needs to change there, because they're not goals that a team trying to make their way in the playoffs should be conceding at all.
No, I agree. And it sounds like Chris Wilder agrees as well. In his post-match presser, he was very, very sort of vocal about his dismay at the defence, really, for the goals that we conceded. There's no way that Anderson should be let go as a free man to nod that first one in. No one going out to close Bassey for the second, and everyone will point to the goalkeeper as well, which, upon reflection and replays of the goal, I can see why. I think it is poor goalkeeping as well. And the third, I think everyone will look at the third as the worst goal conceded all day, really. How Dijksteel's miscontrolling the ball on halfway when he's the last man is incredibly poor, really. It's not acceptable for a team that is looking to be in those playoffs and towards that top end of the division. So yeah, the touch is awful, and then the goalkeeping again. is incredibly poor once again. So yeah, hopefully in the coming weeks we sort of get back to basics with defending and just do the simple things better, because it's certainly not going well for us at the moment defensively. The goals we've conceded, as I said earlier on in the podcast, is more from our own making than other teams being exceptional going forward, which certainly needs to change in these next few weeks.
Yeah, and as you say, Chris Wilder certainly wasn't happy. I think the quote was that had he have been able to make as many changes as he would want, he would have took the whole back five off at half time. And to be honest, not really what you'd expect from certainly the back five that we've seen for the majority of the time under Chris Wilder, because it would be hard to pick faults in any of them really. But certainly errors have crept in of late, and we can't keep on as good as we are going forward and creating chances. We can't simply just keep on relying on the likes of Jones and some of the forward players plucking out these moments of brilliance once we are sort of 2 and 3 goals down, because it'll, as we've seen against Bristol and as we've seen against Barnsley on Saturday, it'll become too late to, claw back the game, and results and points will start to slip away from us. In terms of the defence, one thing that really caught my eye on the actual club post-match interview that Chris Wilder done was, he spoke about some of the sort of more nitty-gritty parts of defending, and just in terms of, clearing the lines, winning first headers, winning first battles, and just doing the simple things, as you put it earlier. And, one change perhaps that, that would signal towards me as Lee Peltier coming back into the team now. I know, of course, in, the manner in which we play, we do play out from the back. We put a lot of trust into the wide centre-backs in the three. But perhaps it might take, someone of Peltier's skill set where, yes, he's not, great on the ball, and I think everyone can see that by now. But certainly, he'll win his first tackle, he'll win his first header, and he'll always really give you a solid performance, touching wood, if he does come into the team, that he doesn't make a mistake, that we have seen. Is that something that you perhaps would look at just to maybe for a few games, or, for the foreseeable future? I'm not sure. Do you think the defence deserve that? But certainly as an option, maybe shore us up a little bit. Would you be against sort of Peltier coming back in and being that defensive force that he is?
I think it's probably worth a look. We have a cup game this week, of course, coming up, which is sort of, I don't want to say getting in the way of our running, but it's probably the last thing we need at the minute, with a big game coming up on Saturday as well. And I think if you're going to experiment with some sort of personnel changes, I think it's probably the time to do it this in the midweek game against Spurs. We're going to be probably defending for pretty much 90 minutes anyway. So it'd probably be worth a look if Peltier was to drop into, I'd imagine, Dijksteel's position. So I think if you're going to do it in midweek rather than a league game on Saturday. But yeah, Dijksteel, despite his magnificent piece of play against West Brom to get us that second goal, I think he's been slightly off it in the last few weeks, if I'm honest. At Man United, I felt like he struggled, but of course that's expected, playing against superior opposition.
Yeah.
But in other games as well, he's looked probably the most uncomfortable out of the back three on the ball, really. And yeah, I think Peltier, defensively would be probably a bit more sturdy than Dijksteel as well.
Yeah, I think certainly, as you say, Dijksteel, and I'm actually a big fan of Dijksteel. I think he is often the player where he'll get the ball at the back and sort of, similar situations to the one that he misses on Saturday and Barnsley go through and score the third. Often he does make you sort of have your heart in your mouth a little bit and plucks out a turn or just plucks out a pass where you think, God, he really is making me sweat when I probably don't need to. But I think almost similarly to Joe Lumley, in the formation that we play and the way that we play, Dijksteel, although he has been, as you say, I agree, I think he's probably been, poorer than we've come to expect from him over the past 2 years, as of late. But I think he's still the best suited to that right centre-back role. It was more, as Wilder's saying about, shoring things up a little bit. I think Peltier would give you that in the back three. Someone more of a sort of traditional defender that is, just want to head it and kick it and do the sort of basics of defending, which of course isn't a bad thing either. Just moving sort of slightly on from the Barnsley game, I know a lot of the questions that we're about to go into are revolving around situations that have occurred during the Barnsley game. To be honest, I know we said previously in the podcast, well, myself have said, and I know you'll agree, Nathan, we never intend to hone in on one player, in a negative fashion, but we can only tweet out about, listeners' thoughts and questions that they might have. And it was a resounding response that, people wanted us to talk about the goalkeeper situation again. I think firstly, a lot of questions come in about why Sol Brynn was recalled, given that he was having, from everything we saw and the reports from Scotland, a really, really solid first season in professional football. And now he's, turning out for the under-23s, where perhaps it would have been better to just keep him playing senior football. And to be honest, I think a lot of people thought when he was first recalled, actually, that, if the poor form of both of our goalkeepers continued, that had played up until the point when Brynn was recalled, that actually he would maybe, make a challenge himself for that number one spot. It does raise a few questions, doesn't it, Nathan? The fact that Brynn is now back at the club, but never really makes the matchday squad at all.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it is an interesting question asked by plenty of people in the replies to that tweet. Yeah, it's a very strange case with the goalkeeping situation. Lumley probably needs to be taken out the firing line. In the last few weeks, he hasn't done himself any favours, really. I think he could probably do better with Semenyo's effort against Bristol City. I think he could certainly do better with Bassey's double on Saturday. I've been quite sort of vocal on the podcast about his distribution being a lot better than Daniel's is. But as shot stoppers, both very similar. I think you could argue or toss a coin even which one you'd take on that front. But with Brynn coming back, he's now been back at the club for 2 months now coming up, and hardly making the matchday squad is certainly very, very strange. Of course, Stojanovic was out the exit door in January, which meant we needed a keeper back in the ranks, really, in case there was an injury to one of our other senior keepers. But surely Brynn's just not going to play third fiddle to these two that are currently in the squad. I think he probably will get a chance, really. with the with the performances that are being served up at the minute from Joe Lumley. We do probably need a change in goal, but then you can argue, is it worth throwing a young goalkeeper into the firing line in the middle of a playoff push, where we're a club that is sort of half and half with the fan base, where some fans sort of expect us to be in those playoffs and pushing now that we've went on this good run of form under Chris Wilder. And if Bryn makes a mistake, a fan's going to get on his back like they do to Lumley, or are they just going to turn a blind eye and say, oh, well, he's a young keeper? It's certainly an interesting argument to be made, but I think that you don't see what happens until it happens, do you? So maybe it is worth an experiment, and Bryn does deserve an opportunity.
Yeah, of course, we speak about Bryn and rightfully so. There's always if there is a certain position in the team where someone isn't performing up to the sort of standards that you'd expect, there's often a bit of a clamour for academy players to come through. I think in terms of Bryn, although perhaps, and me included, to a certain extent, would like to see Bryn given a chance. And, we have a cup game, although it's a very big cup game against Tottenham and against some very dangerous opposition. It might be a chance to perhaps change that. Excuse the voice break from me there, Nathan. But yeah, as I say, it's a situation now for me where I look at it and I think I actually don't think, should we put Luke Daniels in goal or should we put Solbryn in, that either of them could do much worse than what Joe Lumley currently is doing. And, I don't like, honing in on one player and really criticising, but for me, I've always felt like, even since January, that's the one position that we are weak in. I think it's quite apparent. I think a lot of people have noticed that. And, as I say, should we make that change? Daniels played under Wilder. He played early on under Wilder. And I think, as you say, it was his distribution that lost him his place in his team. But, there's also that argument of, well, should Bryn come in instead of Daniels, that, if he starts making mistakes, you're potentially risking, ruining his confidence altogether. And, if it really goes bad, and of course, if that does happen, we'd definitely be hoping that it would not. But, if you ruin a goalkeeper's confidence that much at a certain age, you can potentially ruin a player's career, really. And for me, if we were going to see a change in goal, that's why I'd perhaps opt for Daniels. Although I don't particularly think that, given his distribution, and as you say, I think it's probably a toss of a coin between shot stopping between Lumley and Daniels in terms of ability. But for me, if there was a change to be made, and to be honest, I do think it's at the stage now where probably there needs to be a change. I think it would probably be Daniels just purely edging Bryn out because of experience more than anything. So yeah, it's difficult for us, as we say, to go so in depth about one position, but we aren't going to sort of shy away from the questions that we have been asked, and that was the overwhelming topic that everyone wanted us to talk about, and we spoke about it in the last podcast as well. So it is apparent that it is an issue, and still surprising for me that we never strengthened that in January. I don't know if there's anything more that you would like to add on the goalkeeper situation, but I feel like we've covered it as best as we can there, to be honest, Nathan.
Yeah, I think we have. Apart from, I just say about distribution wise, if Lumley is edge. He's got the edge on Daniels. I think Solbrin is a young goalkeeper where it's pretty much ingrained into young goalkeepers now that they need to be good and confident with their feet and their distribution. I'd like to just see how good his distribution is, really. If it's on a similar level to Joe Lumley, then I think that he'll probably get the edge on Daniels, if I'm honest. But yeah, I think that the defence as well just need to show themselves up a little bit, stop giving chances away so easily. But yeah, I think from both of us, it's a resounding yes that Joe Lumley needs to be taken out the firing line at this current stage.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that's as best as we can talk about it. We've covered the other two goalkeepers, and as I say, I think probably a lot of people would agree with us saying, it is slightly surprising that we never did target that area in January. Perhaps we did, and we didn't quite manage to get things over the line. But of course, that's the situation that we find ourselves in now, and we can't really change it, due to the transfer window situation. Moving ahead, of course, at the time of recording Monday night, of course, we have Tottenham at the Riverside tomorrow in the FA Cup, thanks to, that victory against Man United, which I'm sure is still largely in the memory of everyone. Firstly, Nathan, I'm going to ask you, and I think I kind of know, judging by some of your earlier answers in this podcast, is this a game that actually probably we don't need, and in fact is a little bit of maybe it's actually more of, not a little bit of, actually quite a large bit of a free hit for the team tomorrow, because given, Luton's form and the defeat, it makes Saturday's league game all that much more greater. Do you think actually Tuesday's probably come at a bit of a bad time?
Not necessarily at a bad time. Pretty much not at a bad time, because of who we're playing on Saturday are also still in the competition. So if Luton weren't in the next round like we are, and playing in midweek like we are, I think that would be a hindrance. But they've got Chelsea on Wednesday, which will be a difficult game for them as well. But as a Championship side going up against a very good Premier League outfit that have all the pressure piled upon them to win a trophy, they're quite a meme that they never win anything. And they've now got a manager that is a serial winner, and pretty much this is their last chance of winning something this season. I think that piles all the pressure on them. It's a free hit for us. We can go into this game with nothing to lose. We've got a packed out Riverside there, of course. 30,000 in the Riverside. Tuesday night under the lights on BBC One as well. Let's just see if we can cause another upset and shock the footballing world once again, like we did at Man United earlier on in the year.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very nice, but of course you then have to think of, some of the opposition players that we're going to come up against. Often, I think I said this in the Man United podcast prior to the Man United game, I should say. We sort of signal a few players that, people that might, just watch Middlesbrough games and not really take much of an interest in other Championship affairs, just to sort of highlight some of the threats that, opposition coming up might have. I don't really think we need to sort of highlight any of the players, because Harry Kane, Heung-min Son, two of, if not probably, I was about to say two of the most informed players in the Premier League, but are actually probably, if not the world at the moment. As well as Kulusevski, who's come in from Juventus in January and hit the ground running, an assist and a goal against Man City and a goal against Leeds. Kane and Son to add to that. I mean, I don't think there's any shortage of attacking threat that Tottenham are going to give us on Tuesday night. And do you know what? Because of the league position that they currently find themselves in, they slipped up against Burnley, didn't they, after that massive win against Man City? Their bitter rivals, Arsenal, of course, managed to put a few wins together and build up a bit of a gap between the two teams in terms of getting that fourth place. As you say, it's the last chance at silverware, but it's also the last chance of potentially getting European football through the cup competitions. So, it's actually a massive, massive game for them. And as you say, the pressure's all on them.
Yeah, they have to come here and play well and break us down, which I can imagine Borough will set up quite similarly to the way we did at Old Trafford, where we'll just try and counter-attack them, hit them on the break with our pace out wide, particularly Jones down that right. But yeah, it's going to be a difficult task, 100%. They've got the England captain up front and one of, if not the deadliest finisher in the world up top there. The front three, Kane, Son, Kulusevski, as you say, all banging form. They had a great field day at Ellen Road on Saturday, which was nice to see them be 3-0 up after like 20 minutes at Ellen Road on Saturday. It's always nice. But yeah, I think there will probably be changes to the 11 really. Of course, the big tree is back from suspension, which thank whoever's up there that he's back when he is, because we've missed him, certainly. Not just in that midfield as a presence, but with the link up with Jones down that right hand side as well. I think we missed that very much on Saturday in particular, really. With Howson trying to fulfill that role, it just wasn't the same sort of chemistry down that side. So I think we'll probably see Crooks pick up a place back in the 11, really. But yeah, as I say, it's a free hit against a side that have all the pressure on them. They need to come up north and pretty much get a result by any means necessary. Let's just hope that we might have another hand of dunk moment.
It would be nice, certainly, wouldn't it? Another moment like that. And I mean, as much as we all like to, keep our sensible heads on and think that, Saturday is probably, in the grand scheme of things, the more important game. There's no feeling better really in football than knocking one of the big boys out of any cup, whether that be the Carabao or the FA Cup. It's always nice to cause a bit of an upset, and especially in front of a packed Riverside and on TV as well in front of the footballing world. So I'm sure plenty will be tuning in to watch Isaiah Jones instead of the likes of Kane and Son. We speak about Saturday's game, and I think now we move on to it, of course, because of the time of recording. We are previewing both games in this podcast. A whole different task on Saturday against Luton, but nonetheless, an absolutely humongous game for our season, and all the more so because of Luton's recent form. Won 7 out of the last 9 games, and because of that form and as of late, they beat Preston as well, have leapfrogged us into 6th place in the Championship, into the playoff places, after really sort of being, lingering around mid-table for the majority of the season. Now they'll come to the Riverside and be the team above us. So, I think nothing less than 3 points on Saturday is what this team needs, to be honest.
Yeah, it's certainly what we want. I don't have a good feeling about this one, if I'm honest. Since Luton came up to the Championship, they've got an outstanding record against us, really, with fans in. I remember that day they came to the Riverside under Woodgate.
Please just don't talk about that. I'm trying to remember it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm sure many people are still trying to remove that one from the memory. But this is a bit of a different Luton town. Not necessarily in the personnel, but they've just got to grips with Championship football outstandingly well and have really come from nowhere in this second half of the season. As you say, beat press. Derby. It was Derby, I'm sure, wasn't it, on Saturday? They played.
It may have been Derby, to be fair. I may have got that wrong. But
Yeah, I'm sure it was Derby. Yeah, beat Derby, which is always nice, but not in terms of the league table at this current stage of the season for Middlesbrough. But 7 wins out the last 9, so an outstanding start. A really, really good run put together by Nathan Jones's men. But yeah, they're a dangerous side to come up against. We saw earlier in the season, Elijah Adebayo up front, very good centre forward, strong, tall, physical, got a bit of pace about him as well. And yeah, he's a good finisher as well as that. And up there with either one of Danny Hilton, Cameron Jerome, or Cornick running off flick-ons from him and knockdowns. They've certainly got a very dangerous forward line. Playing as a back three as well. Cal Naismith's been outstanding. He's like a versatile utility man, can play everywhere. Used to play up front for Portsmouth in League One a few years ago, but now plays at centre half for Luton. So it's just a crazy story with him. And of course, Sonny Bradley as well, who just has a knack of scoring against Borough at Kenilworth Road. Hopefully that doesn't transfer over to the Riverside. But the last time they came to the Riverside, last season under Neil Warnock, it felt like a big game then for Borough, really. And we came away with a 1-0 win. Chuba Akpom scored that day. He won't be scoring Saturday, but one of our forwards with a scrappy 1-0 win would do us the world of good at this stage.
Do you know what? You've just mentioned the name Chuba Akpom, and to be honest, despite the fact that he is still contracted at Middlesbrough, I'd completely forgotten even existed. So, I mean, Chuba, if you're listening or watching, I'm sure you're not. I hope you're well, mate, because I had actually forgot that he still played for the club. In terms of the threat that they possess, it's quite clear. So, Adebayo, as you say, 12 goals, Harry Cornick, 8, both of which scored against Middlesbrough earlier on this season. And of course, the game that Neil Warnock broke his managerial record in, and then subsequently, quite shortly after that, was actually sacked. So hopefully there's no sort of managerial changes in the dugout in terms of Middlesbrough, because that would be, in fact, do you know what, it's not even worth even mentioning, because it's not going to happen. It's just me being terrified if the day that we actually lose Chris Wilder. Also, you may have noticed, for those that were watching on YouTube, I have just quickly checked on my phone. Nathan, you were correct. It was Derby County. I was adamant it was Preston for some reason, but I'm wrong. So fair play, Nathan, for correcting me. And yeah, as you say, Luton historically, I say, but in terms of recent history since they've come back up, have never been a good side for Middlesbrough's team to play against. And actually, quite ironically, I'd say, Luton give me sort of Chris Wilder at Sheffield United vibes. They come up, stayed up in the first season, solidified, and then that second season they really had a good go at it. And they currently are, they've got actually quite a strong squad. Just some of the names, not sort of the standout goal scorers, but you look at Henry Lansbury, often throughout his career has been, one of the sort of more experienced, better players in the Championship. Of course, I think he's a little bit below that level now. I don't want to curse us before he inevitably scores against us. But, the names are there to be seen. And as you say, Cal Naismith as well. doing a splendid job at part of the back three, despite playing previously as a striker and on the wing in his career. Quite a miraculous change in fortunes for him. But yeah, there's certainly quality in that Luton team, and Nathan Jones has got them playing a way where they've been as good as they have been in a long time, to be honest. So it's a huge game. I don't think any more can be said about that. It's a game that, regardless of the result on Tuesday night, we have to put on a performance for. Otherwise, we'll be beaten. It's as simple as that, because, Nathan Jones will have his Luton team ready to come to the Riverside and try and get a result. So, it's on us to be out the traps quickly and try and hopefully, after, fingers crossed, getting a result against Tottenham, prolonging that home record that we have going on at the moment too. I think that would take it to 9 games if we got a result against Tottenham, which we're yet to see. But yeah, Nathan, unless there's anything else you wish to add, I think that's us done for this week.
Yeah, I think it is. I just, fingers crossed, in a week's time that we're here, beaming from ear to ear after a ridiculous week for Borough in terms of results. We're yet to see what will happen, but it is always up and down in this fantastic world of supporting Middlesbrough Football Club. Nothing's ever easy, and Borough are going to do it the hard way if we're going to do it, so we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah,
one more thing that has just crept into my head just as I was about to sort of finish this podcast up. I don't think we mentioned it in the last podcast. We definitely talked about it in a very, if you can remember this, then great memory, and also thank you for watching these and listening to these podcasts throughout the season. Earlier on in the season, Palmo's in a bun, out the Riverside, nowhere to be seen. The back. They are back at the Riverside, and surely that is some sort of sign from the gods that this is a good time, hopefully for Middlesbrough at the Riverside, hopefully this week, as you say, Nathan. And as always, we've had some quite fierce debates about Palmo's on this podcast throughout the season. Just a simple question to end the podcast on, Nathan. Will you be getting one when you are back at the Riverside?
Do you want to know what? Now you mentioned it, I really do fancy one, but I've had the same routine since Wilder came in.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at the Preston game that we lost at the Riverside that Wilder came in for. So I'm actually unbeaten at the Riverside. I was there for the Millwall game, but the rest we've all won. So do I risk it? Or
I think the easy question is, as a man, and you're very much the same as me, we are set in our ways in terms of, if we do start a run of wins or positive results, you simply can't change it, to be honest. So I'm actually going to tell you that you're not allowed to get one, as much as you may want one, and you're just going to have to deal with that, Nathan, to be honest with you.
I'll take it. The run that I mentioned earlier on in the season when we were playing Man United, the run of me being at games and Borough still being unbeaten, fell foul on Saturday. But the home record still stands. So hopefully 2 more scalps are added to that list this time next week. But yeah.
Yeah, it will be some week and some podcast next week if we do manage to continue your unbeaten run at the Riverside under Chris Wilder's management. I'll certainly look forward to that if we do, and fingers crossed that we can get 2 positive results going into a busy week for this Middlesbrough team. Hopefully they can continue the good form. We should be realistic and say that we've only had a handful in defeats, Nathan, so we can't be too down about it under Chris Wilder. But to finish up, from me and Nathan, as always, thank you very much for listening and watching, whatever way you like to tune into this podcast. I should say, as always, shameless plug, do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube, and give us a review if you are listening on the likes of Apple Podcasts or other audio platforms. But from me and Nathan, thank you once again, and that has been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast.